Tara Correa-McMullen. It was October 21, 2005, in Inglewood, California, East Plymouth Street to be exact. Outside an apartment complex at number 205, a group of friends were just hanging out, vibing the way teens do. Among them was 16-year-old Tara Correa-McMullen. To the world, Tara was a rising star. She was the breakout actress on Judging Amy, playing Graciela Reyes, a tough, street-smart girl trying to claw her way out of a life of gangs and violence.
Everything we can to get you out of here.
You gotta get me out of here, cause I ain't got nobody else.
The role was raw, intense, and believable, but on this Friday evening, there was no acting. There were only bullets. Tara wasn't born into the streets. She was born Shalva McMullen in Westminster, Vermont, and raised on the quiet East Coast. Later, she moved to Northern California and eventually ended up in Venice, Los Angeles, an area famous for its canals and Muscle Beach, not for gang violence. She was a choir girl at Venice High, a natural performer who had never even acted before her mother, who worked at a casting company, suggesting she auditioned for a role in a Martin Lawrence movie, Rebound. She didn't just do well, she crushed it. She had that it factor, something Hollywood loves. But as her star began to rise on screen, her life started sliding in the opposite direction. By early 2005, at only 16, Tara started acting like she was grown. She moved out of her family's home in Venice and into her own apartment in Inglewood. And Inglewood wasn't Venice. It was a different world with different rules. She started dating a man named Christopher Avery, 10 years older than her and known to be connected to the Centinela Park Bloods. Suddenly, the girl who played a gang member on TV was living with one in real life. People around her noticed the change. The bright-eyed choir girl began swapping scripts for street life. There were reports that she went all the way in, allegedly getting initiated into the gang and even tattooing Lady Kick on her chest. It was like the role wasn't just a job anymore. It had become her identity.
Her mother told us that she was dating this guy and he's a bad guy and we were trying to get her away from him. That's where the trouble began.
And then that October night happened. Tara was outside her apartment complex deep in Centinela Park Bloods territory. She had no idea that a predator was watching. Damian Watts, a known enforcer for the rival Rollin' 60s Crips, was on a mission. He wasn't looking for a specific person, he was looking for bodies. He wanted to send a message to the Bloods, and anyone standing on that sidewalk was fair game. Watts rolled up in a gray truck and didn't come with a handgun like most drive-bys. He came with an AK-47, an assault rifle. He pulled up, looked at the group, smiled at one of the men standing there like he recognized him, and then opened fire. Tara tried to run for the safety of the building just a few steps away, but she didn't make it. The high-power rounds tore through the air and hit her. She was struck 5 times in the torso and collapsed on the concrete. Blood spilled everywhere as chaos erupted around her. 2 other men were hit too, but they survived. Tara Correa-McMullen died on the pavement in Inglewood. The irony was brutal. In Judging Amy, her character Graciela Reyes was murdered in a prison gang hit. And in real life, Tara was killed in a turf war she had just stepped into. Damian Watts was eventually caught. It turned out Tara wasn't his only victim. He'd been on a 2-day shooting spree, hunting rivals to prove the Rollin' 60s were in control. In 2009, he was convicted of her murder and handed 5 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole. Haing S. Ngor. On the night of February 25, 1996, in the alleyways of Chinatown, Los Angeles, a tragedy happened that felt like the cruelest twist of fate. Dr. Haing S. Ngor wasn't just an actor, he was a survivor of a nightmare most people can't even imagine. Born in Cambodia, he was a trained gynecologist who survived 4 years of torture under Pol Pot's Khmer Rouge regime, an era that claimed the lives of 2 million people. He survived starvation, forced labor camps, and unimaginable cruelty. He even watched his wife, Mai Hoi, die in childbirth because treating her would have revealed his profession and would have meant execution for both of them. When he finally escaped to the US, he built a new life from nothing. And then, somehow, he achieved the impossible. With 0 acting experience, he started in the killing fields as Dith Pran and won an Academy Award for Best Supporting Actor. He became the first Asian man to win the award. Suddenly, he wasn't just a survivor. He was a symbol, a voice for the millions who had been erased by genocide. He used his fame to track down war criminals and speak out about the horrors of Cambodia. But the one war he couldn't escape was the one happening on the streets of Los Angeles. On that night in February, Ngor pulled up to his apartment on Beaudry Avenue in his Mercedes. He was ambushed by 3 members of a local gang called the Oriental Lazy Boys. They were known for snatching purses and jewelry, and these 3 were high on crack and looking for a quick score. They demanded his gold Rolex. Ngor handed it over. They demanded the gold locket hanging around his neck. That locket wasn't just jewelry. It held the only surviving photograph of his late wife, the woman he had promised to tell the world about. That photo was everything to him. It was the last piece of the life he'd lost. So he refused, and that refusal cost him his life. 19-year-old Jason Chan pulled a .38 handgun and fired. Dr. Ngor collapsed in his own driveway, bleeding out on the cold pavement. The locket was still around his neck, untouched. People tried to make sense of it. Conspiracy theories spread that the Khmer Rouge had ordered an assassination, that maybe Ngor was killed because of the things he said or the people he exposed.
Police are investigating the murder of Haing S.
Police call it a robbery gone wrong. 3 gang members convicted. Still today, a theory among the Cambodian community. It was an assassination.
But the truth was far more senseless. 3 street thugs killed a man over a piece of jewelry he refused to surrender. The shooters were eventually caught and convicted. The gunman got life without parole. Armand Jones. On the early morning of March 17, 2006, 18-year-old Armand Jones was on top of the world. He had just wrapped filming on Freedom Writers, a major motion picture starring Hilary Swank. In a cruel twist of fate, Jones played Grant Rice, a gang member who survives a drive-by shooting in the film. But in real life, on the pavement of an Anaheim parking lot, there would be no escape. Jones was celebrating the film's wrap at the Boogie nightclub before heading to a Denny's on East Dyer Road with his friends Giovanni Boyd and Dwayne Washington. They were dressed to impress, draped in jewelry and looking like the stars they wanted to become. But they were being watched. A crew from the Long Beach Roll 20 Crips was roaming the area, hunting for victims. The gang members included Stanley Stinky Stan Simons, Damon Hillside Hill, and Charles Banks Reynolds, the man who would become the Trigger Man. When Jones's friends went into the restroom, the gang cornered them. They were robbed at gunpoint for their shoes, cell phones, and gold chains. Jones, wondering what was taking so long, walked into the restroom and walked straight into a trap. One of the robbers snatched a chain right off Jones's neck, but Jones fought back. He chased the thieves out of the restroom and into the parking lot, demanding his property back. That's when the night turned deadly. Charles Reynolds raised a handgun and fired. The bullets pierced Jones's chest. Another man, Ron L. Spencer, who had been with Jones's group, was shot in the head but miraculously survived. Jones staggered back into the lobby of the Denny's and collapsed. The young actor bled out on the floor of a 24-hour diner, killed by the very lifestyle he was acting out. Reynolds was eventually sentenced to life in prison. Johnny Wactor. On the early morning of May 25, 2024, the streets of downtown Los Angeles claimed another life. This time, a beloved actor known to millions. Johnny Wactor, famous for his role as Brando Corbin on General Hospital, had just finished a late-night shift bartending at Level 8. It was around 3:30 a.m. when he was walking a female coworker to her car near Hope Street and Pico Boulevard. He noticed men huddled around his parked Toyota Prius. At first, Wactor assumed his car was being towed, but what he walked into was far worse. A crew from the Florencia 13 gang, a notorious group known for running organized theft rings, was stealing his catalytic converter using a floor jack. Wactor approached and simply asked if they were towing his car, but one of the thieves, later identified as 18-year-old Robert Isaiah Barcelo, pulled a gun. In a final act of bravery, Wactor stepped in front of his coworker, shielding her with his body. He raised his hands to show he wasn't a threat. He tried to protect someone else, even in the face of danger, but it didn't matter. Barcelo fired, striking Wactor in the chest. The crew fled the scene, leaving him to die on the pavement as his co-worker screamed for help. People rushed over and the scene became chaotic, but the damage had already been done. Wactor was only 37 years old.
37-year-old Johnny Wactor was fatally shot early Saturday morning. Authorities say he was killed after approaching 3 men who were attempting to steal the catalytic converter from his car.
Police arrested 4 men in connection to the killing. The case revealed a disturbing level of organization. Barcelo and another suspect, Sergio Estrada, were allegedly stealing parts to sell for the Florencia 13 gang. They weren't targeting Wactor specifically, they were hunting for parts to sell, like catalytic converters, which are easy to steal and profitable. Dedrick Gobert. Dedrick Gobert was the face of a specific kind of 90s street cool. As Dookie in John Singleton's masterpiece Boys in the Hood, he was the scene stealer with a pacifier, a quirk he actually used to quit smoking, which then sparked a nationwide trend among youth.
See, I ain't sick, I ain't all skinny and shit.
But on November 19, 1994, the line between his on-screen persona and reality blurred fatally at an illegal drag race in Mariloma, California. Gobert was just days away from his 23rd birthday. He was at the races with his friends, including Ignacio Hernandez and Jenny Hayan, just trying to have a good time. But the night didn't stay fun for long. A dispute on the track over a race turned into a full-on brawl with a group of Asian gang members known as the Acro Boys Crazy, or ABC, a blood-affiliated set. Witnesses said Gobert, caught up in the moment, flashed gang signs and disrespected the ABC members, shouting "F Bloods." That was the kind of mistake that doesn't stay a mistake for long in that environment. The fight ended, but the tension didn't. It escalated into something deadly in seconds. That's when Sonny and Raka, a ruthless ABC enforcer who had been using methamphetamine that night, pulled out a .38 caliber revolver. And Raka didn't just fire a warning shot, he executed them. He shot Hernandez in the head and chest. Gobert, who was on the ground, became the next target, and Raka walked over and fired a bullet into the back of his head, ending his life instantly. Then he turned and shot Jenny Hayan in the neck, leaving her paralyzed. When asked later why he shot her, and Raka's response was chillingly cold. F them, they deserved it. Merlin Santana. He was a star on the rise, the kind of actor who made people feel good just watching him. He was famous for playing the smooth-talking Romeo on The Steve Harvey Show, and he also had a memorable role as Stanley on The Cosby Show.
Can you sing?
Nah.
Can you play an instrument?
Nah.
He was that rare kind of kid actor who managed to grow up in the spotlight and keep his career moving. But on the night of November 9, 2002, his fame couldn't protect him from a deadly setup in the Crenshaw district of Los Angeles. Santana was sitting in the passenger seat of a car driven by his friend and fellow actor Brandon Adams when everything went wrong. They were about to leave the neighborhood when they were ambushed in cold blood. The murder was orchestrated by a 15-year-old girl named Monique King. Merlin and Brandon had met Mercedes sometime earlier at a Chinese restaurant in LA. She recognized Merlin from the Steve Harvey Show and introduced herself. Merlin, flattered by the recognition, was happy to talk to her.
She saw Santana, she recognized him from the Steve Harvey Show, and she wanted to get to know him better.
So on that fateful evening, Merlin called Mercedes and asked if she wanted to hang out with him and some friends. She agreed, and things seemed fine at first. But when she arrived, Brandon noticed that something was off. Mercedes seemed nervous and uneasy, acting strangely as she walked around the house. She was on edge and kept glancing at her phone. After a short while, she made a phone call and abruptly announced that she needed to leave. As she walked out of the house, Brandon watched her head to a large vehicle with 2 men inside. It turned out these were the same guys who had dropped her off earlier, though Merlin and Brandon hadn't known that at the time. The vehicle drove off for a few blocks and then stopped.
This raised some suspicion on Brandon Adams' part. So Brandon followed her out of the house and saw her get into a large SUV.
Brandon's instincts kicked in. and he had a strong feeling that something wasn't right. He suspected that Mercedes was just casing the place and thought it would be best if he and Merlin got out of there. The two friends decided to leave and headed to their car, but as soon as they got inside, the situation quickly escalated from a feeling of unease to a full-blown attack. Apparently, this girl had made up a lie and told her older gang-affiliated friends, Damian Gates and Brandon Bynes, that Santana had made unwanted sexual advances toward her. It was a total fabrication, but in the streets, accusations like that don't get investigated. They get treated like a verdict. Gates and Bynes were enraged. They didn't care if it was true or not. They went hunting for Santana. As Santana and Adams tried to leave, Gates, armed with a high-powered rifle equipped with a laser sight, lined up his shot. A single bullet pierced the trunk of the car, traveled through the rear seat, punched through the headrest, and struck Santana in the back of the head, killing him instantly.
Brandon pulled away and was driving away. He looked over at his friend Merlin Santana and noticed that he had been shot.
It was a 1 in a million shot, fueled by a teenage lie and a violent mindset. Gates was eventually sentenced to 3 consecutive life sentences plus 70 years. King, the girl whose words pulled the trigger, was convicted of second-degree murder. Lloyd Avery II. He's etched in cinema history as the blood who shot Ricky in Boys in the Hood. In the film's most iconic scene, he leans out of a red car and blasts a shotgun, killing the promising football star. But after the credits rolled, Avery didn't stop playing the gangster. John Singleton tried to guide him, giving him another chance by casting him in Poetic Justice. It was a smaller role, another thug, but with more nuance. Singleton saw potential and wanted to help him transition into serious acting, but Avery wasn't in the right mindset. He showed up late, skipped auditions, and publicly dismissed the movie as whack at the premiere. The statement burned bridges. The people who could have helped his career turned away. By the mid-90s, the small film checks had stopped coming. Avery drifted further away from the world he grew up in and deeper into the one he used to only pretend to be a part of. He left Baldwin Hills and moved into The Jungles, a blood-affiliated neighborhood in South Central made famous years later in Training Day. He even tattooed Jungles above his left eyebrow, a permanent declaration that the actor had become the life he once portrayed. People who knew him said he was different now, paranoid, short-tempered, quick to snap. One friend compared his descent to Tupac's character Bishop in Juice, driven by ego and chaos.
The film, I saw he had a tattoo across his forehead, and it said Jungles.
Jungles are a neighborhood in South Central LA.
Things escalated in 1999. After an argument with members of the Nation of Islam, Avery left the Jungles and, not long after, committed an act that would seal his fate. On July 1, 1999, 2 people, Annette Lewis and Percy Branch, were shot near Santa Barbara Plaza. Witnesses said Lewis was hit multiple times, including in the back. It was believed to be over a drug-related dispute. The suspect, Lloyd Avery II. Back in Los Angeles, Avery took on what would be his final role, G-Ride, in the 2001 indie film Shot. It was his biggest part yet, and he took it too seriously. He refused to respond to anything but G-Ride, carried a fake gun in his waistband at all times, and acted like he was living the role 24/7. Director Roger Roth said he could barely sleep. Avery constantly intimidated him, threatening violence, keeping him on edge. He'd tell me he was gonna kill me, then smile and walk away, Roth recalled years later. You'd never know if he was serious, and that's what made it terrifying. By late 1999, the police were closing in. His brother, Che Avery, remembered their last night together. They were sitting in the garage, passing a blunt back and forth. Lloyd leaned in and said quietly, "I've had a good life." Then he asked, "You want to hear something crazy?" Che froze, sensing what was coming. He pulled out a pocket knife and told his brother not to say another word. The next morning, December 8, 1999, it all ended. LAPD officers surrounded their grandmother's Beverly Hills home and arrested Lloyd on 2 counts of first-degree murder. Che remembered seeing the unmarked car on the corner, the officer pretending to read a newspaper. The setup was obvious. Lloyd didn't resist. In 2000, he was convicted and sentenced to life in prison. But the violence didn't stop at the gates. On September 4, 2005, at Pelican Bay State Prison, one of California's most notorious facilities, Avery was killed by his cellmate, Kevin Gerald Roby. Roby was already serving time for the assault and murder of his own sister and claimed to be a Satanist. He strangled Avery, who had recently found Christianity, during a dispute. Then he arranged the body in a horrifying ritual, laying him across a pentagram drawn on the floor and painting the walls with his blood. Roby later said it was a message to God.
And saw Lloyd's body in the middle of the cell, in the center of a pentagram, and there was blood all over the walls.
It was a tragic and eerie ending. The man who once played the killer of Ricky Baker in Boys in the Hood died in a way that felt straight out of a horror film.